Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I did not plan to become the person who turns a camper into a shelter on the shoulder of Interstate 70, but that is what happened. My name is Ethan Moore. I am 38, a diesel mechanic from Independence, Missouri. I make my living listening to engines and solving problems that do not talk back. My wife, Lena, is 34, an emergency room nurse from St. Luke's Hospital on the plaza. She can read a face and a pulse the way I read oil pressure and coolant temperature. The third person in our little group is Ryan Collins, 27, a traveling videographer who asked for a ride at a gas station off US, 24 the morning we rolled west. He had a pack, a GoPro, and the kind of direct look that says he does not scare easily. We were driving our Winnebago Mini Winnie, a Class C motorhome built on a Ford E-Series chassis with a gasoline V10, 55-gallon tank, and an on-hand generator that draws from the same tank and shuts down when the level drops below 1/4. It had always been a weekend machine. It became more than that when the broadcast cut in. It was a little past 4 p.m. when every station on the dash radio switched to the same signal. A piercing tone came first, then a recorded male voice. The message said there were public safety incidents in multiple regions, that people should remain in their vehicles if on the highway, and that emergency services were responding. The words were calm, like a manual. The tone underneath them was not. We were west of Topeka and aiming for a campground outside of Salina. The sky was clean. The road ahead was not. Brake lights bunched into red lines and then stopped moving. Within minutes, both lanes in our direction were a parking lot. People put cars in park, opened doors, and stood up on seats to look over roof lines. A mile ahead, a man ran between the rows of cars like he was late for a flight. Others ran too. Then something changed in the sound of the crowd. Voices were not calling for help, they were warning. A woman fell in the median. A stranger reached to lift her and then recoiled so hard he went down himself. The woman stood again with a stiffness that did not match a normal stumble. She moved in a straight line at a speed that did not match her fall. I told Lena to lock the doors. She had already done it. She pulled the privacy curtain behind the cab and snapped it shut. Ryan lowered the overhead bunk, slid his pack out of the way, and set the GoPro on the dinette table. He did not turn it on. He looked at me and asked what I wanted him to do. I told him to lower all the shades and then check the roof vents. The Winnebago had thin pleated blinds and felt-lined curtains. They were not armor, but they were the difference between obvious light and a dark shape that looked like a parked RV after sunset. I shut off the cabin lights and switched 2 LED strips to their lowest setting. The fridge stayed on, but I moved it to gas mode to stop the compressor from cycling. Outside, a horn stuck on a steady note and would not stop. The broadcast repeated. This time, the voice mentioned the emergency alert system and asked drivers to remain in their vehicles and avoid contact with people showing sudden changes in behavior. It said to keep the windows up. It said first responders were forming corridors to clear the highway. I opened the passenger window a crack to listen. A smell came through that did not have a name. Not smoke, not fuel, not anything mechanical. I closed the window, locked it, and put the keys in my pocket. We decided we would not step out unless there was no other option. We placed the fire extinguisher by the entry door, a tire iron along the edge of the bunk, and a short piece of metal conduit beside the sink. Those were tools, not bravado. I prefer a tool I understand. We were 2 cars right of the center line on the westbound side. Beside us, a family in a minivan kept their windows up and their mouths moving. I could not hear them. I could tell from the father's hands that he was trying to be steady. He nodded at me once through the glass. I nodded back. The woman from the median moved between cars now with a straight gait and did not stop when people yelled at her. When someone tried to hold her, she twisted out of his grip and continued without hesitation. By the time she reached the minivan, There were 3 other people moving like her. The family locked down. The father's eyes found mine again through the blinds and stayed there like I was an anchor that meant nothing and everything at once. Then Lena said my name in a tone I know from nights when someone arrives in the ER in bad shape. I turned. She had the first aid kit open on the table. "Whatever this is," she said, "it is fast. Keep us sealed. No light, no sound." We made the camper into a closed box. I used duct tape to reinforce the thin latches on the small crank-open windows. I slid 2 frying pans over the stove vent and wedged them in with a silicone trivet to damp any sound if we needed to cook. I stuffed a folded sleeping bag up into the cabin skylight and taped around it so that no glow would leak. Ryan climbed into the cab, checked the surround of the windshield curtain, and then aimed his camera upward through the small skylight hole while I held the blackout around the lens. He did not say anything. He just took a still image and pulled the camera back. The sun slid toward the horizon and took the warmth with it. The broadcast was the only calm sound. Some of the other stations had gone to static. One public station had switched to a live desk where a woman with a steady voice read city names and asked people to remain inside. When she reached Kansas City, she said there were many disruptions and that law enforcement had shifted to only the most urgent calls. She did not say what those calls were. She did not have to. When the light outside was almost gone, shapes began to move between the cars in slow loops. One would pass, then 2, then nothing for a minute, and then another. The pattern had no rhythm. A siren approached and then faltered. Far away, a helicopter moved along the interstate and then turned north. Somewhere behind us, a pickup truck accelerated to full throttle and slammed into something with such force, the steering wheel of our camper vibrated through the column. The night swallowed the sound. We breathed in and out and said nothing for a long time. At 8:40 p.m., the generator on a 5th-wheel trailer 3 vehicles ahead of us started and stopped twice. Generators are loud and steady when they are working. They are louder when they struggle. The sound drew attention. Shapes converged on that trailer the way they would around a porch light that had suddenly switched on. I watched the silhouette of the trailer's owner through a sliver where our curtain did not quite meet the door edge. He stood up on the rear bumper with a baseball bat, swung once and lost his grip. The bat disappeared into the dark. He climbed down and tried to push the starter again. The generator coughed, and everything that had moved toward the sound kept moving toward the sound. Lena put her hand on my wrist. I understood what she meant. Stay still, stay quiet. Do not try to fix something that will only break you. We made the night into a routine. We did not talk unless we needed to. We ate 2 granola bars and split a bottle of water. At 11 p.m., I switched the fridge completely off. It would hold its temperature until morning if we did not open it. We moved to the rear bed and lay on top of the covers with our shoes on. Ryan took the first watch from the dinette. Ear pressed to the curtain fold, camera off. At 1:30 a.m., he shook me and moved back to the bed. I listened to the outside world with the kind of focus that made time stretch. Every creak of an expanding metal panel on a parked car. Every gust of wind through the highway grass. Every single footfall on pavement felt like a coded message. I learned the difference between the slow, aimless steps of a person who was not right and the careful, measured steps of someone trying to pass unnoticed. When the careful steps came, I held my breath and waited. They moved past and faded. At 5:15 a.m., the first light drew a grey line across the windshield behind our curtain. In the quiet, the sound of 2 birds somewhere in the median felt like a message from a prior day. We had made it through the first night. Surviving one night is not a strategy. It is a chance to plan a strategy for the next day. We listed what we had. The Winnebago's gasoline tank was a little under half. At 8 miles per gallon, that meant about 200 miles if we could move without idling in place. The generator would shut itself down once the gauge fell below 1/4, so we could not rely on that alone for power. House batteries were 2 12-volt deep cycle units at approximately 100 amp hours each. The onboard converter could charge them when the engine ran, and the generator could charge them when fuel permitted. We carried one 20-pound propane cylinder for the stove and the fridge's gas mode. We had a 5-gallon water jug, plus the fresh water tank in the RV. Food was 3 days of canned meals, some pasta, rice, and a cooler that would be done by nightfall if we kept opening it. Tools included a socket set, a breaker bar, wire cutters, hose clamps, a 12-volt compressor, a siphon pump, and a roll of taillight repair tape that is translucent red. There were 2 headlamps, 1 small lantern, and a handheld ham radio that belonged to Ryan, who had bought it as a travel backup but never got his license. He knew how to turn it on and scan. I knew how to listen without transmitting. The broadcast told us to remain in vehicles. It did not answer the question of how long that would be the advice. The traffic ahead had not moved. We had to make the camper into something that could stand still for a while, without drawing attention, and then move decisively when the chance came. My job was to do the first part. The second part would come later. At midday, we heat-sealed our light discipline. I cut a rectangle of rigid foam from the bedboard under the mattress and slid it into the skylight frame, then taped the cracks with painter's tape and a second layer of duct tape. For the windshield and door windows, we used the reflective folding sunshades we kept under the seats. I backed those with a layer of black contractor garbage bags and taped the edges directly to the vinyl trim. We left a narrow viewing slit at the far right side of the windshield where it could be closed, with 1 strip of tape in an instant. For the ceiling vents, we tucked fleece blankets into the wells so that no light would escape, even if someone turned a light on by mistake. We did not plan on any mistakes. The sun set later that second night. The interstate stayed clogged. The radio said there were response efforts underway near Junction City and that a corridor would be available as soon as possible. That phrase has a certain weight when you can feel it through a steering wheel and the wall of a camper. It told me we were on our own for now. On the third day, a thin rain began in the afternoon and built into a steady cold sheet after 6 p.m. That gave us 2 advantages. First, the sound of rainfall concealed the small noises the camper made as it cooled. Second, it gave us water. I dug the green poly top out of the storage compartment, stepped onto the rear bumper at 6:20 p.m. and kept my body square to the doorframe so that anyone looking would see a dark, door-shaped mass and not a person. Lena held the door half closed on my hips so I could work. I clipped 2 corners of the tarp to the roof ladder, used 2 spring clamps to attach the other edge to the highway sign post in the grass right behind us, and used paracord to pull the tarp down so it formed a shallow V. Then I set a collapsible bucket and the 5-gallon jug directly under the lowest point, and tied a small weight to the corner so the drip point did not wander. I slid back inside without letting light out. Within minutes, the bucket started to fill. That water went through a gravity filter we had used for camping. The filter is a simple device with a hang-bag, a hollow fibre element, and a hose. It is slow and reliable. We let it run through the night and into the morning. Ryan filmed none of that. He preserved power by selecting shots that mattered. When he pulled the camera up under the foam at the skylight for a 6-second tilt down the lanes, what he captured was not dramatic. There were no sirens or chasers in his frame. There was a highway that had not moved in days, a helicopter far off over the prairie, and a line of vehicles whose owners had mostly stopped honking and mostly stopped calling out. He said, "If anyone ever plays this back, they will hear how quiet it got." On the 4th night, one of the vehicles near us made a mistake that explained why we were still quiet. The owner of a compact car to our left opened his door during a lull, maybe to get air or to move something. The dome light came on and stayed on for 4 seconds. It was not bright, just enough to paint the back of his seat. A shape 50 yards away turned its head. The shape changed direction. The owner shut the door and turned the light off. The shape kept coming. I did not narrate this to myself, and I did not turn it into a lesson. I just felt my jaw tighten and my hand close on the tire iron. The shape circled the car for a long minute and then continued up the line. The owner sat very still for a long time after that. By the 5th day, food became a decision. We could ration and sit, or we could move and risk sound. The broadcast changed its tone that morning. It said containment operations were underway on multiple corridors, and that some sections of highways would be cleared with heavy equipment and fire to block further travel by those who were not responding to normal signals. It did not say the word napalm. It did not have to. My job is to understand how people and machines solve a problem fast. If you need to stop movement along miles of open lanes, you make barriers with earth movers. You pull wrecks across lanes with winches, and sometimes you set controlled fires to limit crossings. That meant one thing. If we waited where we were, we might find ourselves on the wrong side of a barrier with no fuel and no plan. We agreed to move at first light the next morning if the line ahead of us showed any gap at all. During the last hour before dawn, I prepared. I pulled the spare 12-volt accessory socket from my toolbox and clipped it to the house battery bank so I could run the ham radio without drawing from the engine's battery. Ryan tuned it to the NOAA weather channel at 162.550 MHz to hear any updates. After that, he scanned local repeaters at 146.940 and 146.760. He did not transmit. He listened. On one channel, a calm voice said, "National Guard convoy eastbound at mile 233, westbound corridor under evaluation." We were well past mile 233, but the message told me two things. There were organized vehicles moving, and the highway was being assessed in discrete sections. We made a shape as small as we could. I moved everything heavy to the floor. I latched every cabinet. I set the driving lights to off and covered the fog lights with 2 strips of the translucent red repair tape so they would throw a low, dull edge to the shoulder if I needed a hint of the white line at night without broadcasting our position. I taped a red lens over one headlamp light switch as a reminder not to flip it by habit. I checked tire pressure with the compressor and inflator. The rear jewels were within a pound of their recommended load setting. I checked the oil level and the coolant overflow tank. The engine was ready to go. At 6:10 a.m., we heard a freight train far to the south. The sound felt like a normal thing in a string of not normal things. The sky brightened. 2 cars ahead, a man started his SUV. He inched forward 10 feet and stopped. The space in front of him was not huge, but it meant that somewhere ahead, something had moved. I fired the engine, selected drive, and let the Ford idle us forward so slowly the chassis hardly swayed. We covered 30 feet and stopped, then 40 more and stopped. After 10 minutes of this, I saw what had changed. A semi with a flatbed had been jackknifed across the lanes 3 vehicles up, blocking both lanes and half the shoulder. Overnight, someone had cut the securing chains on the load and let a set of steel plates slide off onto the shoulder. That cleared a partial path. Now there was just enough room to thread the motorhome through by folding in both mirrors and kissing the guardrail with the right rear tyre. I asked Lena to spot me out the side window and to tap the glass with her fingernail when I was within an inch. I asked Ryan to kneel on the dinette and watch the left front fiberglass cap so I did not shave it off on the trailer. We moved 1 foot at a time, and when the left fender cleared by a 1/4 inch and a piece of rubber squealed briefly on the rail, I stopped breathing for a heartbeat and then let it go. We passed the blockage. The vehicles behind us began to follow. The line ahead remained a series of short jumps broken by long holds. We did not lean on the horn. We did not call out. We did not invite company. The queue became a thin thread of cautious drivers moving because staying had become another form of risk. 2 miles west, we found the first rest area. The entrance ramp was blocked by 3 small cars angled nose to nose. I could have pushed them. It would have been loud and slow. There was a break in the perimeter fence 40 yards further up, where a maintenance crew had recently been. I aimed the nose there, eased through, and stopped on the service road behind the rest area building. The main parking lot held dozens of vehicles left at odd angles. The lights inside the building were off. The vending machines near the entrance had glass fronts, and one was busted out. The rest were intact. We made the rest area into an operation. Lena stayed in the camper with the door locked and the radio volume off. Ryan and I moved as a two-person team. We each carried a backpack, and I carried a crowbar and the tire iron. We did not open the entry door to the building. We found the service door at the rear, where deliveries come in. It had a push bar that yielded to a measured shove. Inside, the air was stale and cool. The vending area had a coin change machine bolted into the wall. The snack machine had laminated notes from a route driver taped to the side. Refill dates, quantities, contact number. The depot room beyond held cardboard boxes stacked too high. They were printed with brand names for chips, crackers, bottled water, canned iced coffee, and energy bars. The boxes were light enough to carry. We did not take everything. We took what we could move fast. 12 bottles of water, 2 cases of protein bars, a box of crackers, 8 cans of coffee, a case of mixed nuts, and a carton of first aid restock items that looked like they had been meant for the maintenance closet. We also took an emergency kit in a red soft bag from the wall near the service counter. It contained bandages, gloves, a flashlight, and a whistle. We left a note on the counter that said, "Taking only what we can carry. 2 adults, 1 guest. RV on service road. No damage. Please forgive." It felt useless and necessary at the same time. In a side office, we found a map taped to the wall. It was not a tourist map. It showed a strip layout of I-70 through Kansas with mile markers, rest areas, turnarounds, and maintenance access gates. Someone had circled 3 sections in red. The circles were labelled with dates and short phrases. One said, "Contain line 1, eastbound closure." Another said, "Heavy equipment staging, west." The last had a word I did not want to see in red by a half-complete underline. Burn. There were also 2 clip printed notices. One was a general alert instructing maintenance crews to secure facilities. The other was a convoy instruction sheet for state vehicles moving west in groups of 5, with police escort, lights on, sirens off, and no stopping. There were no times. There were no signatures. The paper told me people had tried to build order and had run out of time to do it the slow way. We heard 3 footfalls in the hallway outside the office. Not running, not careful either. I flicked my hand. Ryan killed his light. We stayed still for 20 seconds. The footfalls moved on. We used a back exit and returned to the service road. When we reached the camper, I opened the door with the quietest motion I could manage. Lena had the fire extinguisher in her hands and her face steady. We loaded the food and water, divided the bottles into 2 places so one hit would not cost us all of it, and then I took 10 minutes on the roof. There was a small RV dealer off a frontage road we had passed earlier in the week. I'd bought a spare flexible solar panel there on a whim 2 months ago and never installed it. It was rolled in the storage bay. I unrolled it, laid it on the roof between the AC shroud and the skylight, and used 4 plastic clips and paracord to keep the corners from lifting. I ran the leads down through the fridge vent and connected them to the battery bank with an inline fuse. It was not perfect wiring. It was good enough. 100 watts of panel under late morning Kansas sun does not look like much. It felt like something. We spent one more night near that rest area without running the generator. We ate cold meals and kept the RV as quiet as a parked car. The rainwater rig gave us enough to be comfortable without waste. We took turns with the radio. On the public safety band, we heard a few words at a time in the calm voice of people reading to one another from script fragments. Westbound, closure at, maintenance gate, do not approach, corridor will be. That word again, corridor. It means you can move if you're in the right place at the right time. It also means you cannot if you're not. On the 7th morning, we moved. The highway had more gaps now because some vehicles were pointed into the median, and some were on the shoulders, and some had rolled forward a half mile and then stopped again. If we lingered in one place, shapes would drift near and then drift away. If we kept an even, slow pace and made no sudden engine sounds, we passed unnoticed. We learned to steer in and out with the droning idle of a vehicle that looks abandoned while moving. Noise is a magnet. Even a smooth engine can produce a note that cuts when it jumps in pitch. I treated the throttle like a fine adjustment knob. When we needed to clear a smaller sedan that had scraped across both lanes, I stopped the RV, slid out with the hood release tool from my kit, popped the hood, disconnected the battery negative cable to silence the car alarm that might go off if we pushed it, slipped the transmission into neutral, and then Lena and I pushed together while Ryan steered through the driver's window. We made that car part of the new barricade along the centre line, and we did it in 30 seconds with almost no noise. At a truck stop near Russell, a man beat on our side door with the flat of his hand once at noon and then again at 12:04 p.m. He said he needed help and that he had a family in his box truck. His voice had both panic and calculation in it. We were not a rescue unit. We did not open the door. Lena moved to the window and said she was a nurse and asked if anyone was injured. He said one was, and he used a word that nurses use for a certain kind of injury. It was the wrong word for what he described. Either he was lying or he was out of his depth. He asked if we had food. We said we did not. He shouted that we were selfish. He moved away. I breathed out some air I'd been holding. An hour later, a line of shapes moved slowly toward the same truck. They did not come to our door. They moved toward the truck that kept making noise. At sundown that day, the sky went from gold to grey in 3 minutes. We had pulled off onto a farm access road near mile 181 to avoid a dense knot of cars. A windmill in the field turned once and then stopped in a lull. We drove with only the faintest glow from the taillights, so anyone behind would have to be very close to see us. The red repair tape over the fog lights gave me enough light to read the edge line if I needed it. Most of the time, I drove by feel, letting the crown of the road centre us. When we reached a little rise, we could see west for a long way. It did not look like a map with a line and a destination. It looked like a series of short choices. During the next 2 days, we developed a procedure for moving through tight sections. I would exit the cab, pop the hood on any small car that might alarm when rocked, disconnect the negative cable with a 10mm wrench, slip the shifter into neutral, and then we would push the car at the bumper with a folded moving blanket we found in a pickup bed, so the fiberglass front cap of our RV did not grind down. When we hit something too heavy to move, like a tractor trailer canted across the lane, we looked for a ditch crossing or a maintenance gate. The maintenance gates are placed at regular intervals in the median to let highway crews cross. They are sometimes locked with a chain through 2 welded eyes. Chains fail under leverage. I used the long breaker bar on a soft pin and eased the gate open without cutting or ringing anything metal together. We crossed, moved forward 50 yards in the eastbound lane, re-entered westbound when the lanes diverged, closed the gate behind us, and kept going. We never left a gate hanging. A lighter vehicle behind us might need that closure to keep sound from carrying through it like a funnel. By the time we reached Hayes, the fuel gauge sat just above 1/4. That was not a number. It was a threshold. If we dropped below, the generator would not run, and while we had solar, it was not enough to recharge both batteries after a full day of quiet use. We needed gasoline. Semi-trucks carry diesel. Their tanks are useless to a gasoline engine. What we needed was a pickup truck, an SUV, or a car with a metal filler neck we could tap without tripping an anti-siphon. The newer cars are harder. The older ones are easier. We found a farm-use pickup with a simple neck and a tank that smelled like regular unleaded. It was parked near an equipment entrance with a gate half open. There was no one in the cab. The door was locked, but that did not matter for the fuel. I slid the thin siphon hose down the neck, listened for the note change, lowered the other end into a 5-gallon jug, and squeezed the bulb until siphon started. Gravity did the rest. We took 2 jugs, poured them in, and closed the gas cap. We left a note on the windshield that said, "We took 10 gallons, left water and food on the seat. RV on I-70. Thank you." It felt small. It felt better than just taking. Inside the door, Lena placed the case of water and a zip bag with protein bars and the rest of our crackers. We moved on. The highway changed as we neared Colby. There were more signs of organised movement. On one overpass, someone had spray painted "West open at night" and an arrow pointing ahead. Spray paint is not a law, it was a clue. At sundown, we tucked into the shadow of an overpass and shut everything down. The wind whipped at the red tape on the fog lights and made a soft, flagging sound. Ryan whispered that he had recorded 3 minutes of the empty lanes and the shape of the sunset. He said his audience, if there ever was one, would want to know the shapes of the days more than the action. I told him to keep a record of miles and decisions too. One day, we would need to explain how we chose. Around midnight, the sound of engines approached in a pattern that said convoy. There was no siren. The rhythm of tires on the joints of the concrete had the math of military traffic. Steady spacing, moderate speed, no abrupt throttle. 5 trucks rolled by in the westbound lane, then 2 more, then a final one. Ryan pressed his face to the slit in the curtain. He said he could make out a lead truck with grill guard, then 3 dark cargo trucks, and at least 1 pickup with a shell and a light bar blacked out. I turned the key without starting the engine to power the dash and watched the fuel gauge. Above 1/4. If we joined them and kept engine speed low, we could follow their wake. If we drew their attention, they might stop us. If we lagged, we might lose the corridor. We waited 10 seconds to let their sound mask ours. Then I started the engine. The V10 caught in one turn and idled at a low, even note. We pulled onto the lane and kept the distance. Convoy driving at night under light discipline is a matter of restraint. Their speed held at about 35 miles per hour. I matched it and kept 400 yards back. I did not want their taillights to even be dots. I wanted their wake on the air and the message they sent ahead to guide us. Twice they slowed for debris we would not have seen in time otherwise. Once they sped up through a low, light grass fire that burned on the edge of a service road and threw a wavering heat line across the highway. I kept my hands loose on the wheel so I did not overcorrect when the hot air hit the windshield. Lena watched the right edge, called out changes in the pitch of the shoulder, and kept her voice low and even. Ryan recorded none of this. He watched it without a lens, and I was glad. Not everything needed to be memory on a card. Some things needed to be muscle memory only. Near Goodland, the convoy turned off at a maintenance crossover that led to a frontage road. They did not turn on turn signals. They just eased over and used the gap. I followed. The frontage road ran parallel to the interstate for 2 miles and then sloped gently up to another overpass. On the far side of the overpass, something glowed faintly. It was not the orange sheet of a big fire. It was a string of warm human lights set low and partially shielded. I let out a breath I had not realized I had segmented into a dozen small pieces. I said, "Watch your eyes. If this is real, do not stare. We have all driven at night and had our pupils blown out by a sudden flood of light. We kept ours ready." The frontage road narrowed as it ran down to a gravel lot beside what looked like a closed way station. The convoy ahead rolled under the canopy one by one. A person in a reflective vest stepped out, lifted an arm shoulder high, and lowered it again in a wordless invitation. A second person motioned with both hands to keep sound down. I could see the shape of a Jersey barrier line behind the building, a rectangle of parked campers, and the faintest glow of generator exhaust plumes moving sideways in the wind. My mind ran through the checks. Are there too many vehicles with no owner in sight? Are there signs of uncontrolled shouting? Is there a sound pattern that says this is a trap or a mistake? None of those were present. The lot had the quiet of people whose plan depends on quiet. We rolled forward at a walking pace. A woman with a clipboard met us at the entry and tapped the hood with 2 fingers, so lightly it was more a gesture than a touch. I lowered my window 2 inches. She said in a normal voice, "Please park by the cone line and shut down. Keep lights off. We will talk in a minute." I nodded. I parked. I shut down. I set the emergency brake because setting the emergency brake is how you tell yourself this is a real stop and not a pause. Then I looked at Lena. She was already taking her hospital badge off her jacket zipper so it did not catch the light. Ryan tucked his camera into his pack. He did not need to be told. For 10 minutes we sat, Sounds had shape now. Kids whispered and were answered by adults. Someone moved a fuel can and set it down without banging it. A soft voice came from a tent at the far end of the lot, counting from 1 to 20 in Spanish, and then back to 1 in English, a game you play to keep minds from racing. Then the woman with the clipboard stepped to my door again. She said, "We are a moving camp. We call ourselves a caravan because the word convoy is taken. We move west at night to a safer area near the foothills. We keep strict rules. No running engines unless scheduled. No lights. No shouting. No bringing attention. We share water and fuel. If you join, you agree to the rules. If you do not, we can direct you to another exit. We are leaving at 2 a.m. It is now 11:20 p.m. I asked for details because details matter. Where are you headed? An area near Limon tonight, then beyond, then to the east side of the Front Range as soon as it is safe. We do not make public the exact spot. It is not a fort. It is a place that is easier to defend than an open lot. Who leads? We are guided by people who drove the route last night. We vote on major changes at dusk. I am Tess. I keep the list and make sure we do not forget anyone at a stop." Lena said, "I'm a nurse. I can help with first aid." Tess looked at her and nodded once with a gratitude that did not spill into a speech. "We have a few with minor injuries and 2 who are not doing well but stable. We will be grateful for your help. We keep a separate area for anyone who is not well, with 2 people at all times. We do not let anyone wander." Ryan asked, "Do you want recordings?" "I'm not posting anything. I am documenting." Tess thought for a second. "Record faces only with permission. Record procedures freely. People will need procedures." That was the first time in days that I felt my shoulders drop to a normal height. Procedures are my language. Rules are not a punishment. They are safety. We joined the line. A man with a notepad took down the make, model, and plate of our Winnebago. He asked our names and wrote those too. He gave us a card with a number and told us our position in the order of travel for the night. We were Unit 14. The generator schedule showed that Units 3 and 9 would run theirs in sequence for 90 minutes each to power a charging station for radios and a single portable freezer for insulin and other medications. Anyone else running a generator needed to clear it first because sound carries in odd ways under highway canopies. I asked if there was a fuel pool. He said yes. We would put in what we could afford and draw what we needed after the people with urgent medical devices had their share. Lena followed a team to the small medical tent. It was clean, simple, and exactly what you can do with good practice and a small inventory. 2 cots, a hand-washing station made of a water jug with a spigot, a bleach solution for wiping surfaces, a box of gloves, and a lined trash container. The patients were a middle-aged man with a sprained wrist and a woman with dehydration and a fever that was responding to oral fluids and rest. There was no one in the tent who matched the sudden, startling changes Lena had seen back in the hospital. Tess explained that they kept anyone with even a slight change observed by 2 different people in a separate vehicle they monitored from outside. It sounded harsh. It also sounded like a rule you make when you know what is at stake. Ryan walked the perimeter with permission and filmed the procedures they had set up. How to move fuel cans without slosh by using a funnel and a jerry can spout. How to arrange reflective triangles low to deflect attention rather than draw it. How to tie a privacy blanket around a porter toilet chair to make a dignified corner behind a box truck. He did not film people without asking. He did not narrate. He captured the shape of a plan. At 1:50 a.m. we started in sequence. Unit 1 pulled out of the lot. Each following rig counted to 30 inside their cab, and then pulled out in turn. No one jumped the count. No one revved. We drifted onto the frontage road like a string of dark barges on a smooth river. At the merge with the interstate, we waited for Unit 1 to clear a path. They had a small bulldozer on a flatbed with a winch on the front. The operator popped a car out of the way with the bucket as gently as if he were nudging a sleeping dog. It was not graceful. It was quiet. The night drive into Colorado was steady and controlled. We kept 100 yards between vehicles. If someone in front braked, the brake light was a flicker behind a shield, not a flare. If someone behind us drifted too close, we tapped our hazard light switch once to remind them without a word. Lena kept time checks in 15-minute intervals, so I did not grip the wheel until my forearms locked. Ryan noted the mile markers and the exits we passed in a small notebook. He added short details that would matter later. Unit 6 needed 5 minutes at mile 29 to secure a sliding door. Unit 11 lost a cabinet latch. Duct tape fix worked. After dawn, we tucked into a way station east of Lyman and shut down. Tess walked the line and checked on people with the same steady voice. The people with the bulldozer explained that there were 2 more choke points ahead, but that they had moved enough cars the night before to let us thread through without stopping if we timed it right. A man in a baseball cap and a calm face outlined the day plan. Rest, low sound, water refill rotation using the station's outdoor spigot that still flowed faintly, and a vote at 6 p.m. on whether to push to the foothills that night or hold one more night here. A woman with a map case showed me the alternate farm roads if the interstate became impossible. She had drawn the lines with a pencil and a ruler and labelled each intersection with a small code that matched a note in a notebook with elevations and shoulder widths. It was not guesswork. It was a system. Lena worked in the medical tent for 2 hours. She came back with a face that was tired and satisfied. She said the sprained wrist looked better and the fever was down with rest and fluids. She instructed 2 volunteers on how to set up a hand hygiene station that did not waste water. She taught someone how to take a pulse without squeezing too hard. She washed her hands with bleach water and then with clean water, and then sat at our dinette and ate a protein bar like it was a full meal. At 6:05 p.m. we voted. The choice was to move that night and aim to reach an area east of the Rockies that the lead group had scouted, or to hold and move tomorrow. The arguments were clear and even. Move now, weather is good, fuel is adequate, and there were reports of operations moving east that could build a barrier behind us. Hold. 2 vehicles had minor issues that would be easier to fix with daylight and full rest. The vote was close. We moved. I tightened the hose clamps on our fuel line to the generator for later use. I checked our tyres again. I printed the new convoy order in my head. We were still Unit 14. The last stretch had 3 hard moments. The first was a disabled tractor trailer across a narrow bridge. The bulldozer could not operate on the bridge deck without risking it. Instead, the operator brought the dozer up to the approach, hooked a chain low to the trailer frame, and used the winch to pull the nose just enough to open a lane. He did it in one pull, without jerks. We rolled through with inches to spare. The second was a sound that came from a group of shapes below an embankment that made everyone want to hurry. The lead truck did not hurry. They slowed. They spread the gap. They kept discipline. The sound did not follow. We did not test it. The third was a sudden dip in the road surface near an overpass where the soil had eroded. The nose of our RV bounced and the house door rattled hard enough to pop the latch. Lena had threaded a strap through the handle and around a cabinet so the door would not fly open. It held. The strap told me something I already knew. The difference between a small event and a big one is often a $10 strap used at the right time. Near midnight, when the air had the cold clarity you get on the plains when there is no humidity, we saw them. At first, I thought it was the edge of a town reflecting a distant light. Then I realized it was too low and too even. It was a string of small, shielded lights, like the ones at our way station, moving in a long curve on a frontage road that paralleled the interstate. The lights did not flicker like flames. They pulsed slightly in a way that said generator under load. I said, eyes low. We kept our gaze just above the hood line so our pupils stayed adapted. As we drew closer, the shape of the line took form. It was a caravan like ours, with campers and vans and 2 buses. They were parked in an S-curve under an overpass where concrete blocked sky from 3 sides. A team of people stood at the entry with flashlights aimed at the ground. They wore reflective vests turned inside out, so only thin strips showed. They were speaking quietly and pointing to positions. Our lead truck rolled forward, raised a palm, and the caravan raised theirs back. Two lines of vehicles became one with a simple hand motion. There was no speech about unity. There was a counting exercise of moving heavy things into new positions without banging them. When it was our turn to roll under the overpass canopy, a man stepped to my window and said, "Welcome. We are heading west at 2 a.m. We have a place near the foothills that is not a promise, but is better than open ground." He handed me a folded sheet. It was a one-page instruction: night drive spacing, radio check channels, visual signals, generator schedule, and a box at the bottom that said in plain words, "Rules keep us alive. Keep them." I folded it and slid it into the dash tray. I did not need to tape it anywhere. It was already in my head. We parked where they pointed, between a small Class B van and a short school bus that had been converted by someone who knew how to use plywood and screws well. We shut down. We sat. Ryan leaned forward and placed both hands on the dash, as if to thank the machine with a gesture. Lena put her hand over his and then over mine. We did not say any big words. We did not congratulate ourselves. We were not at an ending. We were at a stop that is part of a route. At 2 a.m., the combined caravan rolled. The road changed as we neared the front range. The land rose and the air thinned a little. The curves were gentle at first and then firm. When the first dark line of the mountains lifted against the stars, I felt a tension line snap in the back of my neck that had held since the day the broadcast cut in. Safety is not a wall. Safety is distance, procedure, and enough people agreeing to act like a team. The final approach to the foothills brought us to an area of low ridges and shallow draws, where a dirt road turned off from a county route and wound toward a grove of cottonwoods near a shallow stream. The spot was not fortified, but it had natural cover and a clear line of sight back down the approach roads. The team that had reached it the night before had already placed 2 vehicles at angles to shield the entrance and had dug 2 short slit trenches behind a berm for watch positions. There was a water point with a simple gravity filter rig set up in a tree, a fuel area with marked cans by type, and a sign-out sheet, a kitchen line where people could heat water for dry meals in a sequence without crowding, and a small area roped off for medical care where Lena immediately bent to work. The rules were posted on a board stripped from a highway sign with the backside painted white. No lights above knee height. Engines only on schedule. No voices raised. Tools back where you found them. And a last line that said, "We move if we must." Ryan asked me if this was the end of the story. I told him no. This was the part where we learned to be a crew. Engines can be rebuilt. People can learn new habits. A group that keeps a generator log and a water rotation schedule and a quiet hour can last longer than a group that tells each other stories about what was and hopes that will put fuel in a tank. We put the Winnebago into a rectangle of vehicles that formed a windbreak and a light brake. We rolled out a length paracord to hang our wet jackets, and we joined the morning watch. I took the second shift beside a man with a calm voice who had once managed a warehouse in Denver. He handed me a small field radio and showed me the call procedure in 3 sentences. We watched the sun draw a line across the top of the ridge and down into the draw. It was the first sunrise I had watched without counting footsteps and listening for metal flecks. It was not quiet. It was the right kind of sound. Low voices, clink of a pot lid, the repeated cough of a small generator easing into a load as someone plugged in a charger. Later, we helped build small improvements. I bolted 2 pieces of angle iron to the front bumper under the fiberglass cap of the Winnebago to hold a 7-foot section of square tube, then welded a flat plate on the front of that tube with holes for a shackle. It was not a plough. It was a gentle persuader for light debris that might save our radiator in a pinch. We made a wire loom under the dash to isolate the ignition circuit from the house power so I could cut the cab lights completely at night start. We used red film to make 2 small, low-intensity marker lights under the stepwell so no one would trip when we did have to move at night. We taped a copy of the convoy signals card above the driver's visor and another by the dinette for checklists. Lena set up a roster of basic medical checks anyone could do: temperature, pulse, hydration status by skin pinch on the back of the hand, and a quick look at pupils and coordination. She did it as a way to give people tasks that would catch changes early without hysteria. She did not treat anyone like a suspect. She treated everyone like someone who needed a steady process. Ryan started a manual that did not need power. It was a 3-ring binder with dividers for fuel, water, radios, night signals, route notes, and tools. He printed the rules in clear block letters. He drew the hand signals with a black marker and a ruler. He pasted in the emergency phone numbers from the rest area map because someday someone will pick up a phone again, and those numbers will matter. He kept the binder in a weatherproof sleeve under the dinette. Anyone could read it. No one could walk off with it without 3 people seeing. When we finally rested that afternoon, I lay on the rear bed with my boots off for the first time in days. I felt the Winnebago shift slightly as the wind changed. I heard a kid laugh at something small and normal. I heard someone stir a pot. I heard Ryan turn a page in the binder and make a small sound of satisfaction the way you do when you finish a list and everything on it is real. I looked at the ceiling and saw the foam insert in the skylight that I had taped in the rain 2 days before, and I thought about how every little piece matters when you stack them. You cannot plan a whole world. You can plan the next 10 minutes, and if you do 10 minutes well enough, you get another 10. As the sun dropped, Tess walked the line of campers and trucks with the clipboard. She checked names and looked in windows not to invade, but to confirm. She stopped at our door and asked if we were comfortable and if our fuel was above 1/4. I said yes. She said, "We are glad you are here." It was not a speech. It was a statement of inventory and gratitude. The day the broadcast cut in, I thought we were alone with a machine on a road that had stopped being a road. A week later, under the edge of the Rockies, I knew we were not alone. We were part of a caravan heading west to a place that was not a guarantee, guided by rules and procedures and people who understood the value of quiet. The highway had been our trap and our corridor. The camper that was once a weekend escape had been our wall and our table. It still was. It would be again tomorrow night when we moved. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.